The Xiaomi Mijia 4K is a budget action camera that not only records in 4K, but comes equipped with the internals of a much better and much more expensive camera. Is it actually any good? Let's find out.
What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. I've been wanting to make a video on this action camera for a long time now. I've always watched from afar as international channels were able to get their hands on the Mijia. Well, thankfully during a more frequent than I'd like to admit, late night Amazon shopathon, I found a Mijia actually for sale with Prime, so boom! Here it is. The Mijia is a 4K GoPro style clone action camera from Chinese electronics manufacturer Xiaomi. They make apparently everything from shoes to scooters to TVs and apparently action cameras. Now, while GearBest provided me the drone from last week's video, I personally purchased this action camera. I just like making sure that we all understand where things are coming from. But let's cover the most important specs inside of the camera to make sure we're all on common ground when we start making some judgments. Because we're gonna be making some judge. It comes with an Ambarella A12S75 chipset, and that's pretty common in these budget-minded action cameras. One of the things that is a highlight is it does have a true Sony IMX317 sensor, which gives me hope for the video quality when we do our tests here in a little bit. It comes included with a 1450 milliamp hour battery that has a reported 120 minutes of battery life. The Mijia can record in up to 4K 30 frames per second and can do slow motion up to 100 frames per second. Yeah, that's a weird option in 1080p and 200, well, at least they're consistent FPS in 720p. Physically, it feels pretty good for the price. One of the things that I generally don't like about budget action cameras is they sometimes feel just terrible. Like, it feels like they're made of very cheap material. And that starts to be a big deal when we begin talking about some of the more important aspects of action cameras here in a minute. And I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think this is the best looking action camera I've ever seen. I love minimalist designs and I love matte black. Both work really well here. In fact, one of the reasons I really wanted to get my hands on this is I think this thing looks so good. The physical controls are pretty basic too, but functional. On the top, you've got the power/record button, and that's the only physical button. That was a really quick segment. On the left side is the micro USB port, and I think it's pretty clever how they made a little sliding door to cover it up. It drives me absolutely bonkers when companies leave these ports exposed. In the same token, a physical aspect that's a negative at this point, however, is there is no HDMI input anywhere on this camera. That's usually standard on action cameras. This doesn't have anything. And on the bottom, you'll find a 1/4 inch tripod mount and the battery door. Now to my favorite, mischievous smile. Oh, I'm not supposed to read that. Let's find out how many of the pillars of action are holding up the Mijia 4K. First up, ease of use. I will never ever get sick of trying to push easy to use interfaces in all video gear, not just action cameras, as one of the, if not the most important aspects. I might force myself to use an unintuitive product a couple times, if I purchased it, but I will probably stop using it on a routine basis if it's not easy to use. And you've heard me say it all the time, when it comes to action cameras, touch screens are my preferred method to change the settings, and the Mijia thankfully does come equipped with a 2.4 inch touchscreen. It's not my favorite touchscreen. It is functional and it works, but it's almost impossible to see in direct sunlight. And where are you most likely to be using an action camera? Probably outside, right? I do like how big the screen is. It is the majority of the back of the camera. We talked about this with the Unreal 4K from last year, but I like when the screens are huge on the back. If only it was a little easier to see when outdoors, it would score much higher in the ease of use category. Pillar number 2, durability. I didn't actually let it hit the ground there. Just like ease of use, I'm gonna continue pushing durability as I'm somewhat of a klutz and I drop my gear all the time. So if a piece of gear can survive me using it, it can survive anyone using it, probably you. And one of the main things that I dislike about the Mijia is, like the Yi action cameras, it doesn't come with any accessories except the battery and a charging cable. I think the camera itself feels fine for durability. It doesn't feel excessively cheap, but it's not waterproof, nor does a case come included to fix this. With the covered port, I think you would be fine for using this for light outdoor activities, but if you're gonna get into more rugged things, you will have to buy a case separately, which is fine that they exist, but I just don't like when if you're gonna make an action camera, either make it waterproof without a case or include a waterproof case. That drives me crazy when people don't do that. Pillar number 3, compatibility with GoPro style mounts and accessories. So, hey, take a step back. GoPro had a pretty good quarter last quarter, so here's hoping that they make a comeback. Either way, these are called GoPro clones for a reason, and like Apple products, all of the accessories are designed for GoPro-shaped cameras. So it's really important to have a camera that roughly matches that shape. That way you can take advantage of all of those accessories. And the Mijia works perfectly well. It does two things that I like best of all in a budget action camera. It's shaped like a GoPro, but it also has a 1/4-inch tripod mount. That is such a useful feature, and even when filming some B-roll for a comparison video later this week, I forgot to bring the case for my Hero 6, and I could not mount it on my tripod. Whereas there was no problem at all because this just has a tripod mount. All cameras of all stripes need to have tripod mounts on them, seriously. But the accessory that I use most of all, and the one that I judge action cameras the most harshly against, is I use my Feiyutech G5 gimbal, and thankfully it fits in there, no issue, works perfectly fine. Pillar number 4, decent, not perfect image quality. Now, I'm not a pixel peeper when it comes to action cameras, and if you are looking to buy a budget action camera, you have to understand that the company had to cut something out of the budget somewhere, and generally the processor sensor is something that is skimped on. You'll get some kind of like Novatech or some kind of really low budget sensor. This has Ambarella, and it has a Sony sensor, and I think the image quality is pretty good. There is some noise in the shadow, the dynamic range isn't the best. Overall, I think it does admirably well for the price. However, when it comes to the image quality, there is something that I will complain about, and it's something that I complain about on a lot of action cameras, and that is it has a pretty aggressive fisheye distortion. Now, in the menu system, it says there's a lens aberration correction option, which I assume they mean fisheye, but even that does not do too much to like constrain the, that wobble just, whoa. And so this is a low light / audio test of the Mijia 4K. We put the A7 III aside for a minute, and let's just use this for a second. So this is the exact same setup that you saw a minute ago with the A7 III. Lights are the same, everything's the same. So this will give you a sense of how it operates in low light and how the audio sounds. So audio test 1, 2, 3, 4. Audio test 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, I really like this camera. It's probably terrible right now because action cameras with their teeny tiny sensors generally do not do well in low light. It's also crazy wide, so like I'm reaching behind the camera right now and it's still crazy wide. So yeah, like it. Everything's in focus. We don't have to do like an autofocus test because like everything's in focus. So okay, back to the pillars of action. And last but certainly not least, pillar number 5, stabilization. I love stabilization. Boom, I did it again. And most budget cameras say they have it, but generally that means it's for the photo setting at best, or they barely. They say they have it, they rarely do. But the Mijia does actually have decent EIS, and it works reasonably well, I think. It is able to stabilize its 1080p footage pretty well, especially when you consider the lower cost of the camera. You may have noticed I said 1080p because the problem is that it only works in 1080p and lower, so it doesn't work with 4K, it doesn't work with its 2.7K, which I mean that stinks, but it's pretty standard when it comes to these budget action cameras. So what, right? So should you get a Mijia 4K? We'll talk more later this week about how the Mijia stands up to both high-end and how it stands up to other budget action cameras, but for right now, I would recommend this if you were looking at getting a budget 4K action camera. It has decent image quality, decent stabilization, looks so cool, and it works with most of the accessories. It's a very functional, very usable action camera. If you're looking for one, I would recommend it. Thanks for watching.